You see, the first half of the age of oil saw the rapid expansion of industry, transport, trade, agriculture, which all of those things allowed the population to expand sixfold. So you have this enormous and brief chapter in history of this rapid expansion. And included in that thing is financial capital. And this is something that's very hard to understand, but apparently the banks lent more than they had on deposit. And at first sight you say that can't be possible, but it turned out that it was. And it was because the banks had confidence that the resulting expansion of all of this investment and debt and loans and everything was sufficient collateral for today's debt. So expansion tomorrow covered the debt of today. But unseen by anybody or unrecognized was that this expansion was not just money, it was the good old cheap energy to make the wheels turn and do everything. So we now face a situation, I think quite soon, when, and this is happening, the bankers begin to wake up and say, well, this expansion isn't going to go on anymore without the cheap energy to make it happen. That means that the massive amount of debt throughout the world is losing its collateral. It's getting to thin cover. So I think the crisis that might emerge, and the physical decline of oil is only 2 or 3% a year. This is not a cliff or a catastrophe. It's quite a gentle thing. But the perception that arises on passing peak, this long decline, this could come instantaneously to the bankers, who suddenly wake up and say, my God, we've got bad debt on our hands. Furthermore, you look at every single company quoted on the stock market, the accounts of all of these companies everywhere have a tacit business as usual assumption about continuing cheap, easy oil such as they've known in their business. So once you realize that this cheap, abundant, easy oil isn't there, that tells you really that virtually every company quoted on the stock market is now overvalued. There has to be some radical readjustment. And capital really has to be reduced in some way to match the declining energy supply on which it eventually depends. So this is the kind of crisis that's staring us in the face. And serious as it is, it's extraordinarily difficult for anyone to do much about it because you can't change the banking structure of the world overnight. What can they do? And talking to these bankers, I find that they don't really care too much. There's bundles of money flow into them every day, and their main concern is to be competitive with each other. They don't want to be out of line with each other, and it doesn't matter to them if the whole thing goes down so long as they're in the crowd. And so I think the bankers are aware of this now, and they don't exactly know how to react, but their main interest is not being isolated from the crowd, so to speak. So we face this monumental kind of weakness of the entire banking financial sector, and really there isn't much easy solution to it.
Something's happening. We've known it for a long time. The West knew it.
Serious problem. America is addicted to oil.
It's inconceivable to me that our children will be able to maintain the American way of life and that the world will be full of resource-based wars of all kinds.
The East knew it.
Successfully completed, it will provide for a significant increase in the volume of oil supplies from Russia to China.
We've known it for a century.
There is no doubt about our absolute and complete dependence on oil. Without oil, civilization as we know it could not exist.
Oil was running out. It's what we grew up in. Post-Middle East, post-peak oil, post-everything. What they called the long emergency. It started slow. Little things at first. Lines at the pump. That hot summer of 2008, when the blackouts started lasting weeks. The avian influenza hit in '09. I got taken out of school when there wasn't enough vaccine. They said it would get better. Something would save us. Biofuels, solar power, cleaner nuke plants, maybe. The Depression hit in 2012. Africa ran out of food, then we did too. People stopped trying to do anything about the problems and just tried to survive. We'd watched them starve for 40 years and it didn't seem real. But pretty soon the scenes we used to watch on the news were happening just down the street. It's been happening for years. Now we're at the tipping point. I was 16 when the Chinese and the Russians figured out they'd rather fight us than each other. We didn't waste time forming the coalition. Now, we're staring each other down across the last wells in the Caspian. I left school for the affiliated press and they sent me overseas. Out here in Turkmenistan you can see it clearer. In the little prefab towns the oil boom left in Central Asia. This is where it's going to happen. In towns too small to have a name, built in 2 weeks by oil industry contractors. It's 2024, the 21st century. People ask me how we let this happen. I tell them, we always knew. The storm is coming.
I think the energy economy has unfortunately has a very short memory. What we have seen in the 70s and even before that, people reminded us that the resources what we have are not endless. We have to make our plans accordingly. However, the very efficient operation of the international oil companies in the markets and making use of the available easy, cheap oil in the Gulf of Mexico and in North Sea made us to be a bit too relaxed. And we have not received an electroshock, namely the high oil prices, to come to ourselves and to really think, where are we going? What are we heading ahead? What are we going there? So therefore, I believe the lack of signal of the prices and the governments not taking this issue seriously, they were the reasons of our being too relaxed. And now, where we are now, we have to be very cautious. We don't need to panic. There is no need for panic, but we have to be very cautious and make the necessary steps as soon as possible in order to reduce the oil demand growth and increase the production. Otherwise, as I said, we can have very troubled days, even higher prices than we are experiencing now.